Good afternoon, everyone, and again, a warm welcome to the second half of the morning session. Without any ado, I'm going to start with introducing our next speaker, who's going to be speaking on the topic, Open Payments to Open Data, Is There a Playbook? The speaker who's going to enlighten us on this subject is the Chief Operating Officer of NPCI, an ex-banker having worked with HSBC, Citibank, Kotak Mahindra Bank in India and across Asia. She is responsible for running the business, including products, operational and technical delivery. She is passionate about payments and technology as drivers to economic value. She now helps NPCI attain its strategic objectives of offering simple, secure, and seamless digital payments experience to consumers and users across the ecosystem, leading to rapid digitalization of India. Please help me welcome our first woman speaker for today, Ms. Praveena Rai.
Good morning, everybody. So lovely to be here. I think we had a few very good sessions to kick off the day. And I'm here to talk about an interesting topic, open payments to open data. And when I was thinking of what really is going to be the way to look at this, I said, what are the commonalities that are there when we are looking at any sort of a platform ecosystem? So one is, of course, the participants in the platform. Those could be the entire ecosystem of users, providers, the consumers, the enabling entities, which in most of our cases is the telecom infrastructure, the data infrastructure, the actual penetration of mobile phones, and really who runs the ecosystem, which means that the formation of rules, the formation of regulations, the formation of all the compliances. And these are some of the elements that go into creating the value we have here. So I thought when we look at this entire citizen scale services architecture, what really is at the foundation? And rather than look at specifics on something that has been done in payments and let's take it and sort of lift and shift and recreate the model for data, I thought we'll really look at what the founding principles are. And if we can look at the learnings, what's worked, what's not worked, what probably has been a learning curve in one or more of what has already been done, then we'll be in a better position to look at replicating those principles. The actual execution of it could be very different. And these are some of the founding principles: consent, access, experience, service, customer needs, and scale. And we'll just talk quickly about some of them here. And I'm not going to bore you with all of this. Everyone knows what this pyramid really is all about. So consent, right? So in the A architecture, consent is at the core. Consent is really at the very center of this architecture. And it is true for any open architecture. So consent is really every participant, whether it is a B2B participant in the ecosystem or a user, a consumer, really providing their consent, but providing it in a way that is simple, providing it in a way that is also protected. And I think we heard ex-DG, Mr. Gandhi, speak about it sometime in the earlier panel, that it's also to do with how this consent, not just with how the consent is provided, but for what it is provided, and how what is provided is then satisfactorily used and controlled How is this consent data managed? So all of this really forms a part of consent. So consent is not just what happens at that point in time. What's the ability of a person to pull back the consent, to pause the consent, to give a time validity for the consent, to say I give consent only for this purpose and not for some other purpose. So all those elements, come into what we call consent. And to make it very transparent, but also simple, because when we say transparent, sometimes you create those 4-5 pages of things that people have to give consent to. Nobody reads them and nobody understands them. So those pages will still be there, but how can it still be something that's so easy for the user to understand? The second is about access. And access is equal access. What is equal access? That's everybody in the ecosystem. Whether it is a provider on one side, a user on the other side, whether it is a financial institution, large, small, whether it is an entity that is formed for a particular purpose, whether it is a not-for-profit, whatever it is, bringing this access across all participants is one of the key learnings, and really democratizing it in that way. The access to people who want to innovate, as well as the access to the end users. So the usage is not about only people, who are more privileged and savvy and, they get this access, but it's about bridging the gaps that exist where the awareness may not be so high and really creating that opportunity for access. And when we talk of responsibility, so access comes with responsibility. When a number of ecosystem participants, so let's take UPI for example, you have the banks on one side, there are the fintechs, there are aggregators, there are a number of parties that play a role in the entire payment ecosystem. And same is the case in the AA ecosystem. Every party has a role to play. And with that role comes responsibility, which means that the entire end-to-end of a service, a transaction, a consent, a flow of data will work only if the rules are followed by each and every constituent of that ecosystem in a manner that is also highly performing. So if a particular API, for example, needs to take 1 second, it needs to take 1 second, and it needs to be delivered by each constituent in that data flow. If not, the total experience that the customer has is going to be seriously impacted. So it has to do with experience, it has to do with how well the connectivity between ecosystem players works, it has to do with how well people are investing in the infrastructure, in the design of their own systems, because a failure at any one of these points is going to mean that the overall data flow is not going to work. And that comes to integrated experience, because all platforms are to do with this integrated experience and the performance that is delivered by each ecosystem player. So for example, if we look at UPI, we look at success rate across each one of the constituents, and success rate broken into technically driven success rate, user driven success rate. So user is not aware, hence user does not know how to fulfill that transaction. If the user is not aware how to fulfill the transaction, that transaction is going to fail. So how does this work in a way that there's a lot of customer awareness? How does the flow happen so intuitively that the customer need not read a manual to conduct a transaction, but it becomes very simple? So all of this comes into creating the integrated experience. So that rule book is very important, and I thought, I heard the previous panel speak about that as well, on the importance of each entity in this ecosystem playing a role in a highly regulated manner and delivering to each of their deliverables in a way that provides that overall experience. Which brings us to experience. And the first driving part of experience is always instant, because instant is the game today. That when I want something, when a user is looking for a particular service, and if that service starts with them consenting to participate in an AI ecosystem, based on which data is provided, and then they have to really get the benefit of that service, the more instant this is, there is going to be success to that experience. And that's again what the open payment has taught us, that instant is the key. And you hear these words like real time, near real time. And near real time is something that, at least I just don't get. Because if it's real time, it's got to be instant. If you say, I'll do it in 15 minutes, it's near real time. It's not real time, it's not instant. Because the consumer or user has actually, moved on. And then, we go to saying easy and simple. So easy basically implies how do we eliminate friction in that experience? How do we make it so simple? And simplicity comes from saying, does somebody need to go through multiple screens? Do they need to have a lot of functionality? Because once there is a service that says, I can do A and also B and also C and also, by the way, D and E, then I don't know why I want to use that service anymore. So simplicity in the way the experience is designed, simplicity in the way it is also communicated to the user starts becoming very important. So ease of the experience and simplicity of the overall design as well as the communication. And all of it, of course, has to be on a solid bedrock of security. Because secure, when we say ease and simple and instant, then the balancing act comes with security. So how can security become part of the design? How can users feel very confident about conducting a transaction while technology handles security? So that's really the key of the game on experience. And then this takes us to service. And this was really a big learning when it comes to both UPI and many of the what we've done on the payment ecosystem. That it's about, on the consumer side, a full life cycle experience. So just focusing on the core transaction is okay as a starting, but does not suffice, because users will look for, what do I do after? What do I do when something fails? What do I do when I make an error? What do I do when something has gone wrong with one of those ecosystem participants because of which the expected experience has not been delivered? What really happens? How is the redressal quick? How is the resolution really quick? And that takes the whole life cycle view. For example, on UPI, there is now something called UPI Help, which brought online dispute resolution, online issue resolution as instantaneously as possible. And we've seen about 35% of customer queries and issues that used to come up are now getting auto-resolved. Because instead of waiting for the customer to say, hey, what happened? We're trying to ping and push back information so that the information and status is more proactively available to the user now. So those of you who are UPI users would have seen it on your apps, that you get a status, and the status is proactively updated. So I think that learning was this full life cycle is very important, and for the user to have an instant experience. So there again, there is a challenge, because unless we design right in the beginning, not just for the core transaction, but also for the customer service part of it, it becomes an afterthought. It becomes an afterthought, and then we're kind of grappling with it after all the tech work has been done and all the processes have already been established. On the B2B side, which is really that ecosystem access we spoke about, a lot of it has to do with really coming together. And this forum is a great example. So happy to see such a vibrant group having all these conversations and use cases being demonstrated, because the whole thing is about co-creation. And I think the beauty that we've seen in all the digital payment systems for sure is really the ideation, the problem statements that come in from everybody who's out there, closer to the ground, talking to customers every day to come back and say, hey, we also need to do this, or this design won't work, or this is the problem that we need to solve. And that co-creation becomes, creates really magical outcomes. And with co-creation comes education. With that comes enablement. Because for an ecosystem to work, and I think that's probably challenge number one, that it doesn't suffice if, for example, NPCI goes down a particular product roadmap with innovation and functionality every 3 months, if the entire ecosystem is also not enabled on those services. The customer can't experience it till every constituent in the ecosystem has been enabled, tested, and is providing that right kind of performance delivery for the customer to experience the service. So having that ability to co-create, enable is very important. We're just talking to friends from NPCI some time back, and the cooperative banks is a great example of how they can be provided equal access, but can they do all the heavy lifting that is required to put up great technology infrastructure? Probably not. So different solutions may be needed for enabling different constituents who come onto the ecosystem. Customer needs, I think customer needs is always the magic. We spoke of many cases, and I think today the whole day is about use cases and what problems of the customer can be solved. Again, it's important not to just stay with probably the low-hanging fruit. Of course, that's always the early win. So I think one hears investment, one hears credit, and I think Mr. Raman spoke about MSME credit, for example, as a need gap that can be addressed. Looking at government welfare schemes, so a lot of people, the financial schemes that exist, looking at a financial inclusion objective, people may not have full awareness. Even the Udyam program, we realize that a lot of MSMEs don't have full awareness of all the benefits that the program offers. So there could be a number of unmet needs within the ambit of what is now permitted by regulations, and as success is shown, I'm sure that ambit can further be expanded. Last and not the least is really scale, because this is going to get very exciting as one starts seeing that inflection point. The AI ecosystem has come a long way in the last couple of years with a number of partners who've come on board and the use cases that are coming to fruition. And what will be next is really to say how quickly this can move forward, because users, I'm sure all the counterparties here, everybody is eager to look at that success, right? And success has its own sort of way to energize and get the adrenaline flowing, create the next round of innovation. And that's really what this whole thing about scale is. So moving this time to market and creating that exponential growth, to which I'm sure this forum is going to be a big catalyst. And that's about it. Thank you so much.
I would request Mr. Devang Modi, Chief Executive Officer, Bajaj FinService Health Limited and Group Head Strategy, Bajaj FinService Limited, also a member of SamvAAD's Governing Council, to come and felicitate Ms. Praveena Rai.